I'm Sheila. We've lived in Australia for 31 years now.
And I'm Kevin, also living in Australia for 31 years.
When did you decide to emigrate?
You can answer that.
The end of 1980, just very early into 1981, I saw an advertisement in a Sunday newspaper, cut it out, showed it to Kevin, and Australia House was advertising, looking for migrants to come to Australia, and the facility for assisted passage was still running at that time. And so that's when we started to think about it from then.
Why did you decide to emigrate? What made you make that decision?
Probably the key factor for us was the fact that we wanted to have an adventure, I think. England was very depressed at the time. They were in recession, a lot of riots, and Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, and long cold winter, all of those sorts of things. But primarily for us, I think because we wanted a better life for ourselves and our children, and thought maybe we'd get that in Australia.
We were given assisted passage, which meant it cost us £50 per adult for a ticket, and the children cost us £50 for the two, and they brought out my tools of trade. And I remember the fella saying, I'd be just a few kilos, 25 kilos I think it was. He said 2 shifters and a screwdriver about pulling you up for that. But I brought out all my tools of trade. I put them into an old suitcase and they came with us.
Yeah, the deal was, if we'd gone back again, we would have had to have paid our fare both ways.
Within 2 years. Within
2 years. If we'd gone back within 2 years. If we'd left after 2 years, returned after 2 years, we would have only had to pay for that, the return. So really when we left, it wasn't a forever thing necessarily. We thought, well, we'll go and see. We don't have to stay. We'll just see what we think of it when we get there.
Once the ball started to roll, it seemed to get more and more attractive. No, we didn't know much about Australia. I remember when we were at Australia House, we bought a courier mail. That was a courier mail. And you could buy Australian papers there, and we come home and we looked at it, and we had to. We got one of the last to be given assisted passage because of my trade, and we had to arrive either in Sydney or Brisbane. And looking at the prices of homes and rent and houses in Sydney compared to Brisbane, we chose Brisbane. But we knew very little about Australia, apart from what we'd seen on the TV.
Yeah, it was actually before Neighbours, so...
right.
Yes, before Neighbours, so really we knew very little about Australia. We'd seen the TV movie A Town Like Alice, and there was a TV show on at the time. I believe it was helicopters, some kind of helicopter rescue. So that was because obviously A Town Like Alice doesn't show you the cities in Australia. So it was literally all that we could see of Australia. And we had a colour brochure sent to us from Australia House that showed pictures of the lifestyle, the centre of Brisbane, children playing outside in the street, children playing in a creek, that sort of thing, all the sunny outdoor lifestyle pictures. We'd seen that. In fact, what sums up how little we knew in England about Australia, when we came in July, the following January, I sent a birthday card to my brother, and his answer to that was, oh, their cards are as good as our cards in England.
And we flew out with British Airways flight BA011.
Do you
Why I remember that, I don't know, but yes.
We flew into strikes here when we arrived. There was a refuelling strike.
So we had to fly into Sydney, and then we had to transfer to an Ansett plane at Sydney to fly up to Brisbane, and all Sheila's clothes had disappeared.
One of the suitcases had gone missing, and it happened to be the one with all my clothes in. And I remember I got a $30 compensation payout. And when we arrived, we went and I remember buying a tracksuit with the $30 it turned up. The suitcase turned up in a few days.
Quite a few days, yeah. But because the sun was shining, everything was so much better.
We both remember the journey into Wakehall, don't we? The houses looking different. Water tanks fascinated us because no one has a water tank in the UK.
And the big old Queenslander homes up on stilts and that sort of thing we've
Yeah,
never seen.
never
Along
seen
Kingsford Smith Drive was just different. It was just different to the brick homes in England and all. But it was very interesting and it looked lush and tropical.
I do remember when we got into it was just like a holiday cabin, but pretty basic in Wakehall. I remember once we'd all gone to bed and we were all tucked up in bed, I remember laying there thinking, oh my God, what have we done? What have we done? I remember that quite clearly. But by the next morning, we woke up in the morning, the sun was shining, the birds were singing, we went into town and we hired a car.
Yeah.
And the girl that hired us the car was just delightful, wasn't she?
Yeah.
She was so friendly and full of advice and really lovely. And we hopped in the car and drove out around the Gap Way. And we thought all the houses looked lovely and everything looked bright and fresh and clear. So it was only that first night that I felt like we'd done the wrong thing. And I don't think I've felt that we've done the wrong thing since then, that night. But we were all very tired, and there we were in a little wooden hut. And
the children weren't all that well.
That's right. We went and bought. Do you remember we went and bought a little spirit stove?
Yeah, to warm milk up.
Yeah, we were eating our meals in the communal dining room at Wakehall, but there was nowhere to warm milk up for Louisa, and she was only 3. And we bought this little spirit stove and a billy can in a shop.
First day in Australia, we bought 2 traditionally Australian items.
And warm milk up in the cabin for Louisa, yes.
When we hired the car from the next day, they give you the free map of the area, and the girl circled all the nice suburbs, and then she put crosses through all the suburbs that you really wouldn't go there, but go to that one, go to that one. She really felt. She was obviously just doing a job, but she was very
helpful. And I remember we loved the accents when we went into shops to buy things. Another thing I remember we bought was a hot water bottle because Susie had got a sore throat, hadn't she? She wasn't really well.
How did you find your experiences after moving to Wakehall?
Kevin had an interview at Wakehall about work, and we'd come on assisted passage because Kevin was an auto electrician. When he went for the interview at Wakehall, the fellow there said, "Well, you'll never get a job."
He said, "There's the years that there's you won't get a job. There's just no work available." And there was people. It was pretty negative, and I thought, and I remember saying to him, "I haven't come for a holiday. I've come for work." So we got the Courier Mail, and there was fairly soon I went for a job down at the Gold Coast, which really didn't exist, and I didn't really want to go and live at the Gold Coast after looking at all the newspapers because it was expensive and didn't really fancy that. Anyway, the job really didn't exist. I think he was looking for an apprentice, and so kept looking at the papers, and this one in Toowoomba came up, and we went to Toowoomba, and I got the job.
Well, actually, we did just miss out the bit that we were only in Wakehall for about 10 days. Susie did have a sore throat, and she was on penicillin. I expect the stress levels had been pretty high before we left England, and I think that's why they helped us get out of Wakehall quickly, and they got us a flat at Wooloowin. But we were only there for about 2 weeks because Kevin was looking for work. And
it was up very close to the Lutwich Centre, which was different for us. It was a big modern shopping centre, which we didn't have from the little village that we came from. There was no such thing as
a shopping centre.
Shopping centres like they've got them in the UK now, which are virtually the same. But it was interesting.
And cooked food for sale, things like hot chickens, the smell of hot cooked food in this shopping centre, I'd never come across anything like that before. And everywhere you look, cold drinks to buy. We noticed that.
We noticed that the sizes of bottles of Coke was much larger than
everything's larger here. It still is.
Yeah.
A box of soap powder. Everything is sized larger in Australia than it is in England. A packet of cornflakes is perhaps that big in England. Everything is smaller, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, we've covered some of your first experiences when you first arrived here, but I'm curious, there's been obviously a lot written and a lot in the media about life under Margaret Thatcher and what it was like in the UK at the time. Just interested in your first impressions of the differences between the two countries at that particular time in the early 80s.
Well, for myself, I'd say probably a sense of optimism here and a sense of depression and so on in England. What do you think?
Yeah, well, we arrived and all the Australians were all so proud of their country, whereas a lot of the English weren't, they weren't proud of their country. And, well, it didn't appear to be. I think, and we weren't from an oppressed, depressed area of England either. We come from Sussex, which was unchanged and very a lot of wealthy people living there, and we didn't feel like we were affected by the anything over there, the political situation, but we just felt there was a general feeling of everybody was a bit miserable
and hard to get ahead. I think we were at a stage in our life we'd got a mortgage and the children were born. We got the family we wanted. We were marking time. We weren't getting ahead in any kind of way in England, and couldn't see how we would be able to. And I think we both felt that once we got here, we realised that the working man gets a better standard of living for his wage in Australia than he does in the UK, or certainly at that time. It's very hard to say now exactly how it all pans out in the UK, but at that time we had got a much nicer house for the same sort of money, didn't we, here?
Yeah, and I do believe that a lot of people are prepared to sort of like knuckle down and got patience. We really haven't got much patience. We like to sort of do something, and and we had the opportunity to come to Australia. I thought, well, why not? Why not? It's worth a try. It's going to be a little bit of an adventure.
But we were 29 years old and didn't take a great deal of interest in politics, it would be fair to say. But my overall feeling is there was that sort of depressed, and England was in recession too, definitely was in recession, and there were a lot of bad things going on. And so it's fair to say it didn't affect us directly. Kevin was never out of work and so on and so forth, but the actual atmosphere of the country at the time was fairly depressed.
There was riots, Brixton riots, and there's every night on the TV there was the troubles in Ireland and all that sort of. You don't think it's affecting you until you don't. But mind you, those things were happening. Even if we come to Australia, they're still going on. You can't not running away from them. You're not so close to being affected by the issues.
Before we started filming too, we're just having a chat, and you mentioned, which was interesting, about the class distinction over there as compared to here. Do you think that was another reason why you thought you might have better opportunities if you came over?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I don't know about now. Things probably have changed over there, but maybe not to a great extent. I don't know. But in England, you know what class you belong to. We certainly did in the 80s. You know exactly where you fit in the class system, and
we were the doctors. You'd be very much more respectful towards the doctors. Like whereas here, I can say to my doctor, "Are you sure about something?" Or you do, "Oh yes," and you work as like more of a team here. Whereas over there when we left, it was a case of, "Oh yes, doctor, no doctor," and he felt a little bit more. Mind you, it may be that because we were younger and
that could be it too, couldn't it?
Yeah.
And it's very, very, although we've been back a number of times, it's very, very hard to say what exactly it would be like living there now. But I'm sure that the class system, you've only got to open your mouth and you know where you fit in the class system. That's, I think. You just simply get a better standard of living in Australia for a working man's wage.
You mentioned too that the doctors do dress a little bit differently.
Oh
too.
yes. When we first arrived, we had to take our younger daughter to a doctor in Wickham Terrace in the very first week. So we were very, very fresh in the country. And the doctor had shorts on, long socks and shorts. And we were just astonished because it was so informal compared to a doctor in England, to see a doctor in shorts. Yes.
We might just move on to when you've obviously settling now, you've got yourself a job. I guess the kids are heading into school. How did you find that experience?
Everything clicked into place, didn't it?
Yeah.
Probably the first thing was having a house built. We went to look at show houses, and we bought some land, and we had a house built. All of that was novel because in England, if you had a new house in England, there would be maybe 30 built in a row, and you just pick one of them. They were all the same. They were all identical. You just had one of them in a row. Whereas
and also being detached was a little bit novel for people, working class people like us.
Upmarket, a detached house.
Yeah, detached house. Yeah, and the lovely thing was that you could buy a block of land, and you then have the house built. You chose from a list of plans, and then you chose the colours, and you had so much choice. That was fascinating for us. We really enjoyed that. But you didn't have to buy something that was pre-existing, or this is what you get. You could choose. The choice was lovely. And,
I suppose at every turn, everything about getting the girls into school and everything, at every turn, it was more laid back than England, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I remember the school uniform and the fact that there was a lot more outdoor play, and because of the red soil in Toowoomba, the children all had stains on their school dresses, which would be unheard of in England. In England, their uniform was navy and white and crisp, and you polished your shoes, and the very laid back uniform was. Oh, I mean, you got used to it.
They look positively scruffy. But both our daughters have got a strong work ethic when it came to schooling, and then after schooling and university, and they wanted to learn. And I believe part of that was the system made it. Just made it a little bit more casual, a little bit more. If you're willing to learn. Yeah, we'll help you.
We both feel that young people in Australia are far more open and outgoing than young people in England. I don't know why that is, but we've always noticed that.
Yeah, especially as we get older, you realise that some of the younger people don't mind the older people, whereas in England you feel like that the young people are, like, he's just a silly old fool. But we find that the youngsters, but it may be of the youngsters that we know, are so bright and so lively and so refreshing with them, and not surly like some of the English teenagers can be a little
surly,
bit dour.
Yes, yeah,
a bit dour.
So I understand that you actually identify yourselves as Australian now, even to the extent of actually supporting the Australian sporting teams. That must cause a bit of consternation when you get back to the UK or amongst friends.
Last time we went was 3 years ago, and England had just won the cricket. Do you remember?
Didn't they like to tell you? They just love to tell you.
I was just waiting for it at the beginning of every conversation, that they'd have to rub it in.
Yes.
And I remember thinking to myself, but you haven't won it for about 20 years. Not that I'm a sport fan, but... Yes.
They won the English football team, soccer team, won the World Cup in 1964, and they do like to tell you, keep telling you, 1964 for goodness sake, we're proud to be Australian.
Yes. I don't. It's not something I have to even think about. That's where my gut feeling is. I am. We live in Australia. We barrack for the Aussies. We've thrown our lot in with the Aussies.
We were in Dublin once, and somebody, some music thing, and somebody said, "Is anybody here from England?" And a few put their hand up. "Is anybody here from Australia?" We put our hand up. He said, "Yes." He said, "You're like we are in Ireland." He said, "The British treated you the same as they treated us." And we were proud to be Australian, to be there.